What's your tennis schedule like, kind of training schedule, I guess, with everything going on?
Well, I made a whole day schedule with my coach. Unfortunately, there's no tennis incorporated in right now. But we're doing a couple of fitness sessions a day, doing a lot of brain work, doing a lot of mental work. So I keep busy, thankfully.
Yeah. Same. I was kind of in the middle of training for a tennis tournament as well, and everything kind of stopped on a dime. It's weird as an athlete to kind of get everything taken away from you without really any notice.
For sure. Yeah, it can be a big part of your identity. There's a lot of athletes that feel like the only thing that they have is their sport, and their results are what they get judged on. So
yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, but for me, I mean, obviously this isn't the first time that I've had to stop playing tennis or a sport, whether it's like injury or just off season or something. But this one kind of feels different in the sense that it's almost a bit easier to not have to play because you kind of understand the purpose behind it and how everybody's in the same boat. It's a bit different when, I'm injured on the sidelines and all my buddies and, competition is still able to practice and stuff, but we're all in the same boat. It kind of makes it a little bit easier to rationalize, not having to play.
Yeah, for sure. And, in times like these, health comes first, and especially global health as it is right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, we all understand it. For a lot of us, it's our livelihood. So everybody has to kind of find an alternate source of income, but, we manage.
Mm-hmm. So let's bring it back to the beginning, growing up in Amsterdam, because, growing up in Canada, tennis isn't one of the main sports. I mean, only recently it's really caught a lot of media attention with Felix Auger-Aliassime and Raonic and Bianca Andreescu. What was the kind of tennis culture growing up in Amsterdam?
Well, when I started playing, we had just come off one of our best generations ever. With Harris and Elting in the double world, Richard Krajicek, a lot of guys, especially in the 90s, flourishing. So tennis has always kind of been a big sport around here. Obviously not as big as football or soccer, as you guys call it. So I started out playing soccer. And then around when I was, I think, 10 or 11, I started switching to tennis until when I was 12, it started becoming my main sport. So, it was always on TV. A lot of the ball sports in general here are very popular. Like I said, nothing comes close to football, but it was fun. I got into it because my mom played recreationally, and she'd pick me up from football practice or from school, and I would have to watch her hit or be at her practice for a little bit. And eventually I started getting too curious. So I wanted to, and the rest is history.
Was tennis, were you better at tennis than football? Is that why you kind of made that transition, or were there other factors in play?
There are a bunch of different factors. I started playing football when I was 4. So I've been playing for 8 years, and it was literally something every day. We trained every day, and then we had a match on the weekend. And tennis was new. I started playing once a week, and obviously when you're new, the improvements come a little faster than when you've played something for a while. So, I enjoyed the improvements, and I enjoyed the moving and something different than football. And then as well, I had to go to secondary school here in Amsterdam when I was 12. And with the new workload and with the added homework, it was just starting to get impossible to play football every day and then play tennis multiple times a week with that as well. And then some office politics within the the football club kind of forced me to make a decision. Do I want to stick with football or do I want to get more serious with tennis? And then after some discussions with my parents, we said, I will give tennis a try. So then I started ramping up the amount of training hours and all of that, and here I am.
Did it cross your mind ever? I mean, you started tennis at a pretty late age, like 10, 11, 12, that kind of age, right? And most players, when they start tennis, are playing 4, 5, or 6 years old. Did it ever cross your mind that you were starting late?
Not really, because I never really had any professional aspirations. It was more so a thing that my parents didn't force me to do, but we were always asked to play a sport. And I was lucky that I find sports very exhilarating as a kid. I always wanted to move. I had a lot of energy. So that came natural to me. But no, it was never a thing for me when I was at that age to provide a gateway into professional sports. It was more so, I'm liking it. I'm starting to get better at it. So why don't we take it a little more seriously? And, eventually you start getting a lot more serious. But no, I never really had any doubts or any comparisons with others because I never really had the thought of playing professionally.
Yeah. It's a pretty crazy timeline when you think of it. I mean, starting around the 10, 11, 12, age range. And I know that you ended up playing tennis at University of the Pacific down on the west coast of the state. So that's kind of a crazy timeline to go, 6, 7, 8 years of playing tennis, and to go from basically no experience to playing, college tennis in the States, which is no easy task, of course. Walk me through kind of how that kind of came about, how, starting at a younger age, just realizing that you were getting better and better at tennis, and then making a decision to come to the States to play.
Yeah, that decision came a little earlier than college, actually. It was around the time when I was 14, where I did a summer camp at IMG in Florida. And then after those 2 weeks, I got invited to play there full time for a year. Apparently they liked my attitude, or they saw something in me, and, I had some discussions with my parents. And at first I was way too scared. I was like, I don't want to go. This is way too scary. I couldn't speak English very well. And like you said, I just started playing tennis a little more seriously. Eventually one day I literally think it was the last day possible to apply. I went to IMG for 1 year, kind of without any expectations. And that kind of turned into a 3.5 year commitment. And I hadn't really thought of college tennis before that. But once you go to, a college prep academy like that, you kind of get rolled into the system of, what do you want to do when you finish high school? Do you want to continue to play tennis? Do you want to study? And like I said, I'd never really had any professional aspirations. So I knew I wanted to study immediately. At the same time, I also didn't want to stop playing tennis. And if I wanted to go back to Amsterdam to go study, it was impossible to play tennis at a high level as well. So that's where the college tennis system came in perfectly. And then, I ended up at University of the Pacific. It was a bit weird because I finished high school a year early, and I was actually verbally committed to Boston University until a hip surgery kind of came into play. And that forced me to take a year off and reapply to a lot of the schools. And thankfully, like a blessing in disguise, UOP came about. And that's where I started in, I think, the fall of 2012. So
the hip surgery, was it something you accumulated playing tennis? Did you have to get it because of a tennis injury? Was it something different? Because hip, I mean, that's a surgery you most likely think about, older generations, right? Like grandmas and grandpas and stuff. You don't normally hear a 17 or 18-year-old kid having to have hip surgery.
Yeah, it was a combination. It was a combination of overworking it and a wrong movement, literally one day on the tennis court. And unfortunately, it was kind of misdiagnosed in the beginning. So I did a lot of exercises for it that didn't really help until in the summer of 11, an MRI kind of showed that my labrum was torn, and that required surgery to get better. And luckily for me, out of that whole rehabilitation process and getting better physically, that kind of stemmed my passion for medicine and kind of directed me to what I wanted to study. So thankfully, a lot of positives came from it. But it did force me to be away from the game for a long time. I know the whole the hip itself is so important in movements. It was something I never really appreciated before really playing tennis as much as I did, because I went my whole life kind of with lower back pain. I always felt it was just my lower back that was hurting, and a lot of physio places misdiagnosed it as well. And my last physio place I went to, they diagnosed it as my hip flexors and all those kind of muscles in the top of your quads and your hips, right? And I sat back and thought about it, and I thought, this is a muscle that I don't really train in the gym that much. I don't really pay much attention to, but it's integral to all my movements on the court. And it really was an eye-opening experience for me. Yeah, for sure. And that's the beauty of the body, is that it's such a kinetic chain where every little part can influence another part. And that kind of moves up and up into, major muscles, like you said, and major movement patterns. So it's important to take care of all of that at any age. Yeah. Tell me a bit I'm really interested in your time in the IMG Academy, because
thinking back to, if I was 14 years old and I had to go somewhere like that, it'd be really daunting to me. And I'm somebody that is from North America and I can speak English fluently. And for somebody like you, I really want to kind of get a sense of what was it like maybe trying to fit in a bit when you went to IMG Academy and trying just to navigate that, because I think that's something that a lot of kids worry about is, not fitting in where they go. If they feel like they're really foreign to a place, they might hesitate taking that kind of leap of faith.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. The beginning of my time there, my homepage was Google Translate because I literally couldn't really figure out what was going on in school and in tennis. But what it does do when you have to speak a foreign language so intensely, it forces you to adapt very quickly. But like I said, even in the beginning when that decision was offered to me, I declined because I was scared. I didn't know what was on my path until literally one day I woke up and said, this might be the opportunity of a lifetime. And thankfully I was in a system where if I said I didn't like it by Christmas or for 1 year, I could go back. I realized that's a fortunate situation. But when you get there and you notice that there's people of the same age, or at least in your age group, there's a lot of people that are in the same boat, kind of what you mentioned in this whole crisis going on right now. You find familiarity pretty quickly because, there's people like you that come from a different country that don't know the language that well, that have never been to, in this case, Bradenton or whatever city. So it's somewhat a little easier to make friends because people are a little bit like-minded in the sense that it's a foreign place and they kind of have to adapt. And then what really helped too is once you get into a rhythm of school days and practices and you start figuring out who you like a little bit more than others and who you can talk to, the busyness of the schedule kind of keeps your mind off where you are at that moment. Even though it was pretty difficult to be away from my parents in the beginning, especially with the time difference. But, there's a lot of great people there that helped me get through it. And thankfully still relationships that are lasting right now.
Mm-hmm. So with your parents at home, did you have any other family members come with you or were you completely by yourself?
My mom dropped me off and kind of decorated the room with me. But I remember vividly when she had to leave, I was already in a physical conditioning session and wow. She had to go to the airport. So I kind of snuck out to go say goodbye. And then, you can say I was on my own, even though there were a lot of people that supported me when I was there. But there was no other family members with me. That's
crazy. That's especially at a young age. I guess at any age, that would be such a huge sacrifice, but especially at the age of 14, such a huge sacrifice. And I always like to, talk a bit about or explain that to get to the level where pro athletes are, their sacrifices are inevitable. Like they're going to happen whether or not. And that's just a perfect example of the kind of sacrifice you kind of have to go through to get to the level that you want to go to.
Yeah. And luckily for me, it never really felt like a sacrifice because of that mentality that I knew I wanted to study. And I knew that what kind of was a blessing at that age is that I wasn't one of the top guys. I never had any good junior ITF results. I wasn't top of my country. I wasn't highly recruited to go to any academy. It was just kind of by a stroke of luck. And because I wanted to have a summer camp that they ran into me, that, that mindset of, okay, I'm the underdog here. I have to make my own path kind of helps put everything into perspective. And it didn't really feel like a sacrifice because it was just what I wanted to do. It can feel like much more of a sacrifice when someone else is forcing you to make those decisions. And luckily for me, the support system then and now is allowing me to make my own decisions with a lot of discussions and conversations. But eventually it's all up to the person having to go through it to make the decision. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Talk to me a bit about what were some of the mental lessons that you learned there at IMG at being, 14 years old. I feel like the mind is so impressionable at that age, at such a young age, right? And what were kind of some of the mental strategies, mental lessons specifically to tennis that you took away from that experience? Being kind of thrown into the deep at that age forces you to grow up very quickly. And I think that kind of translates into your game as well. At that age when you have to start not providing your own meals, but, you have to kind of provide your own daily structure of when to go eat, when to do your homework, when to do your laundry.
literally just adult tasks, if you want to call them that. And figuring out that strategy in your daily life put a lot of advantages into the tennis, in the sense that you can kind of figure out what your game is and how you like to play and the strategies at that age. Even though a lot of looping balls are still being played when you're 14. So, that kind of translates from daily life into your tennis, where you can say problem solving is a big step in tennis and in life. So those two coincided very well.
Mm-hmm. I know currently in your career, you have a lot more success in doubles than singles. When growing up, whether it was IMG or University of Pacific, what was kind of your ratio of playing singles to doubles? Was it the same it is now? Were you playing more singles back then? What was kind of that whole process like?
You grow up playing singles, whether that be in the Netherlands or I think in the US as well, from what I experienced in IMG. But my game was always kind of focused on getting to the net. And especially when I was growing a little bit taller, people started talking to me about my reach and, what I could do with my serve and all of that. So the transition from growing up playing singles to playing more doubles at this level was never really a difficult one. Also not because of the mindset. There's a lot of people that view doubles as a little less than singles because there's less money, there's less exposure, and it's just a different game. Singles players kind of take it on the side rather than a goal on its own. But that never really fazed me. I'm in tennis to go through the process of mastering what I can do in this sport, kind of figuring out who I am, how good I can be. And, it was our goal to get to the higher tournaments as fast as possible. And doubles has provided me a gateway into that. But it was really in college at UOP where I started getting more into doubles, because we spent a lot more time on it because the doubles point is so important in college tennis. So that transition wasn't really difficult for me.
For doubles tennis, I feel like a lot of people maybe underestimate how challenging it is. I think they look at doubles tennis as an easier game of tennis than singles, but it obviously, with the amount of experience that you've had playing doubles, that's not the case. And there's certain aspects of doubles that can be really challenging as well. The physical aspects are probably a bit more obvious, but mentally, one thing I wanted to kind of get your opinion on, because this is something that I've noticed playing doubles tennis versus singles, is when I play singles, I'm almost a little less worried about making mistakes, because I'm really only letting myself down, so to say, if I make a mistake. But in doubles, if I make a mistake, not only am I, letting myself down, but I'm letting my partner down as well. So I feel a bit more pressure playing doubles. Did you kind of have any of that same experience as well? Maybe when you first started playing doubles, or do you still kind of feel any of those struggles as well?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it can be such a different dynamic for every individual. Some people get a lot more loose because they're on the court with a friend, so they can relax a bit more. And usually when people relax, they play their best tennis. Or the example that you gave is that you feel a little bit more stressed because you don't want to let someone else down. That dynamic is something that you have to kind of figure out, especially with who you're on the court with, and for yourself. I'm a person that's kind of hard on myself, so I find it difficult to make mistakes myself. And I'm more of the boat if I get more relaxed when I'm on the doubles court with someone. Also because the advantage that I have is that it kind of highlights the strength of my game and what I like to do. So, whenever you're better at something, you start enjoying it more. But it was an interesting dynamic, especially going into college. When you have, 7, 8, 9, 10 different personalities on a college team, and you get paired up differently almost every week when the coach is starting to figure out what doubles teams work and what clicks. A lot of those mixing and matching of personalities adds to kind of the layer of growth that you go through personality wise, and that you can adapt to a lot of people playing next to you. But it is an interesting transition, especially since tennis in and of itself is such an individual sport, that when you have accountability, like you said, with someone else on court, it can be a little stressful or it can be a lot more relaxing. So I think it also really depends on who is next to you on court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned a bit, but playing doubles in college, it's a bit, I guess, more straightforward process of picking a partner because you have teams to choose from, right? You have a group of 8 or 9 guys that you can be potentially matched up with. But after college and you're playing doubles at the ATP Challenger Tour or whatever it may be, how do you choose your doubles partner? Are these people that you've met on tour and you're friends with, or do you just kind of hit up random people and ask if they want to play with you? How does that whole process work?
Yeah, it was my first professional tournament after college was a challenger that the school got to organize. So thankfully, I got a wild card spot in both singles and doubles. And in doubles with my partner that I played with my senior year of college, we found some success and won 2 matches right away. So it gives you a ranking to go off of playing futures. And, you know, the biggest thing in futures is literally just getting into the tournaments, because there's a lot of people that don't have rankings yet. So the qualifyings and especially the early rounds are tough physically and mentally, because you know that starting point is so hugely important because it can get you into tournaments. So I got into the futures with a doubles ranking already by my side. And then college also provided me with an opportunity to get to know a lot more players than I would have normally, because you play different people on different teams every week. So in the beginning, it was more so kind of hooking up with college guys and saying, hey, you know, we're kind of in the same boat. You want to try playing here a few weeks, especially once you start figuring out who is a lot more serious about their game and who you can match up with off the court as well, since it's such an important part in doubles. And then, you know, when you find some results with that one person, you play a little bit more with that person. And sometimes it happens that your ranking maybe goes up a little faster than the others. And then, you know, people start kind of knowing who you are and you start meeting new friends on tour. And that kind of goes up and up into the rankings until you get to a point where you really want to focus on playing with 1, 2, maybe 3 different partners so that you can get a lot more used to the idiosyncrasies and the little preferences that everybody has.
Mm-hmm. When choosing a partner to play with, do you look for a specific type of partner to fit best with how you play and your strategy?
More and more, especially as the level goes up, you need to have that a lot more than, let's say, in the futures where maybe the playing field is a little more even. One big thing for me is matching up off court as well. I think that translates the relationship that you have off court kind of shows on court as well. You know, the stresses that you might have with each other off court really get intensified and magnified when you're on court together. You know, when someone makes a mistake and you're not on good terms, you're going to react a lot more differently or less forgiving than you would if you're good friends. So that aspect is important. And then obviously everybody has their own strengths. So you kind of look into how you can complement each other for sure. So it's a combination of someone's physical strength, someone's mental approach to the game, and just someone's view on life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Talk to me a bit about what it was like winning your first title in 2018 in Winnipeg. I know that's got to be a pretty special, exactly, up in Canada. I know that's got to be a pretty special feeling to win your first pro title. Yeah. Walk me through a bit of the process of, you know, starting out playing the tournament, and then as you started to realize that you really had a legitimate shot of winning it, and kind of what were any nerves that you felt or any, you know, emotions maybe that you were feeling throughout the tournament.
For sure, yeah. I played a couple of futures with Marc-André Huster, who I played Winnipeg with as well. So that's one of the people that I'm really good friends with off court, and our games kind of complement each other on court. So it was obviously a great partnership. But we never really had any intentions of winning or expectations of winning the tournaments. We unfortunately had to play each other in singles as well. So that's always a bit awkward. But, you know, we came in there kind of not realizing that we got into the tournament. It was, for both of us, we hadn't really played many challengers before, so it was always kind of a shock to get into a challenger. So, you know, once we got in, it was such a relief that we came into the tournament pretty relaxed. And a lot of people didn't know us at that level, so I think that was an advantage as well, especially when you start getting into the challengers more deeply. People start knowing who you are and realizing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. So I think that relatively anonymity helped us a lot. But once we started winning the first round, second round, and then saving a match point in the semifinal, once you're in the final, you never know what happens. It's kind of just a matchup of game by game and round by round. But once we saw we had to play the Granollers brothers in the final, we kind of both not really tensed up, but there were butterflies because he was top 20 in the world, and I think at the time that we played him, he was still one of the top guys in the world. But that's where the mental side of it can help so much, where you can tell yourself to relax and just make it about tennis and not really about the people that are on the other side of the net. But yeah, when we won, it was such a crazy match too. It was so tight and in all sets, and even the super tie break, that everyone was so into the present and into the match that no one really was focused on winning. But then when it did happen, a lot of emotions and relief.
Yeah. I feel like one of the biggest complaints that I see tennis players make is when they're practicing, they feel like they can hit the ball really well, they can move really well, and their practice game never really translates to the court because they feel pressure. As soon as you assign points to something, that's when a lot of tennis players tense up and they can't perform. And there's no bigger stage than, the finals, right? For you to tense up. So for you specifically, was there something you did to kind of relax your body? I know you mentioned that you tensed up a bit, but you still played well enough to the point where you guys won the finals match, right? Was there anything specifically that you did or anything specifically that you told yourself to allow your body to relax and play as freely as you normally would?
A big part of that is the routine in between the points and in between the games on the changeover. When in tennis, people may not realize, but there's a lot of what they call dead time, where the points are short relatively, especially compared to the time that you spend in between points or in between sets or games. And that is a huge opportunity to kind of introspect and tell yourself to zoom out sometimes or zoom in. It kind of depends on what state you're in. But it starts with realizing what state you are actually in. Are you anxious? Are you nervous? Are you too relaxed? Are you really intense? Or, there's so many emotions that can come into play when you play a tennis match. So for me, that match particularly, since we were a little nervous, it was our first final, and because of who we played, I kind of made it a purpose for me to make it a lot about the tennis. Just figure out point by point, okay, what happened? How did we lose the points? Go back to the discipline of, okay, how can we win the next point, or how can I correct what went wrong? And then try to forget about it as soon as possible. Once you've analyzed the previous point, go back into, okay, how do we want to win this point? And I think that's where doubles is a little different than singles, because you strategize before specifically with your partner. So I think that is a perfect gateway into getting yourself set. I also think that's a great tip for everybody, regardless if you play singles or doubles, is, make sure you go into the next point with the plan, because otherwise you're kind of just seeing what happens and there's no real strategy to it. So I think that 3-step process of analyzing the point, forgetting about it, and then getting back to the present for the next point was huge.
Last thing I wanted to end off in, because this is something that I struggle with personally a lot for tennis, and I know a lot of tennis players I talk to, they've dealt with the same thing maybe growing up or still do, is when a point is going on is overanalyzing or overthinking what you're supposed to do. So for me, myself, if I'm rallying with somebody and you're just hitting forehands back and forth, I tend to overthink of what I'm doing. Like I'm trying to think of every little piece of the forehand, and then one of the parts breaks down, right? When you're overanalyzing it. And I wasn't sure if you had any strategies or tips to kind of get past that. And one thing that's kind of worked for me in the interim is, I read it in this book, is when the match is going on, every time that the ball hits the court, like bounces off the court, you just like say out loud bounce. And every time the person hits the ball, you say hit. So you're constantly saying bounce, hit, bounce, hit, bounce, hit. And it kind of takes your mind off of the technicality of the shot and it allows you to play more freely. I wasn't sure if you, with all your experience and everything playing singles and doubles tennis, if that's something that you ever experienced before, the over analyzing of a shot, and how you kind of got past that.
For sure. Yeah, my college coach would love that you mentioned the bounce hit, because we used to do that a lot in college.
Okay.
And yeah, you're right. It does take your mind off of a lot of things, because your mind is not very good at focusing on many different things at the same time. And a tennis stroke is so complex in the sense that, there's timing issues, there's technical issues, there's tactical issues. There's so many layers to just a single shot. So like you said, when you start over analyzing all of those things together, it just goes into an overload and your mind can't focus on anything. So whether that be the bounce hit example that you just gave, or another strategy that can make people focus on just one thing at a time, could prevent a lot of that over analyzing that you talk about. It could be focusing on a specific shot on the ball, whether you want to see the logo on the ball every time, or whether you want to get back to once you've hit a shot, get back to the baseline and then step back. Just making sure that your mind is focused on one specific task is huge, because your mind performs best when it kind of only has one task, and then it goes into what a lot of people call flow. Your mind and body are most connected when you can let things go and when your body can be relaxed, because then most of your brain power, like you and I both said, can go to that one thing that you're focusing on. Mm-hmm. So it just goes back into making sure that you have a good mental image of what your stroke looks like. And, once you feel, oh, this is going wrong, just try specifically focusing on how to correct that specific part. And that can go into something else going wrong. And then you kind of direct your attention to that.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. Yeah. Listen, Sam, I really appreciate you taking some time this morning for you, this afternoon for you to kind of chat a bit. Hopefully this all kind of passes over soon and sports hiatus, not only for, tennis, but I'm assuming you're still a big football fan.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really missing Champions League football right now. Yeah. So that's one thing that I really miss watching. It's a bit different here in North America because it's on around like 3 p.m. So we don't get that like nighttime feeling that I know you guys get in Europe for it, but it's still one of my favorite competitions to watch and cheer for. I'm a huge Juve fan. So I'm assuming from Amsterdam, I don't know if you love or hate Ajax. I don't know how that works.
Love it.
Love it. Yeah. So I know you guys got the best of us last year, but Champions League is still one of those things that I just love watching. I could watch that 24/7.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Sports in general, this time kind of shows what a big impact sports can have on the world and on culture and society. But, like we said in the beginning, health takes priority over everything.
Again, Sam, thanks a lot, man. Hope you and your family are staying safe and healthy during this time, and appreciate you kind of taking some time.
Of course, anytime.